Part 1 Lord of the Ivory Tusks by Patrick Hanley. An Assam tea garden and the jungle country around it is an entirely different place to any other hunting grounds traditionally known as big game country in India. So far as I know, the story of Assam as big game country has not yet been told, and at the moment, the only chord of memory that the name Assam strikes in most people's minds is the familiar one of tea planting. Because of this, the majority of people, when a book about Indian big game is mentioned, immediately have visions of the jungles of the central provinces around Seoni, or a hillside in the Kumaon district in the Himalayan foothills, or some Indian princely state like Mysore, which are all traditional tiger country. Yet they are completely ignorant of the fact that more than 4 times as many wild animals are to be found in the Assam jungles than will be found in jungles in any other part of India. The reason for this, obviously, is the fact that so many books have been written about big game hunting in these places, making them familiar to readers at home, whereas the hunting of tigers and other game in Assam and the observation of wild animals in the Assam jungles has seldom been touched upon. From my personal observation of wildlife in Assam over a period of 15 years, spent mostly in the jungle, and a comparison of it with other provinces in India, in most of which I have either hunted game or observed it, I have no hesitation in saying that there are many more big game animals to be found in 2 square miles of an Assam jungle than will be found in 40 square miles of jungle country elsewhere in India. It was never considered an extraordinary event, for instance, if we ran into any of the big game animals while moving around the plantation, and occasionally we even found them inside our bungalows, or the garden compounds attached to them, as on 4 occasions I did with leopards. Tigers, leopards, elephants, and most other types of game animals were so frequently encountered that after a while we became so used to them that we did not even bother to mention the fact that we nearly ran over a tiger in a car coming home, while turning a blind corner on the plantation road, or that we had been delayed for half an hour keeping an appointment because a herd of wild elephants were grazing astride the road, and it would have been too dangerous to try and drive or ride through them. These events happened almost daily, and once we had become accustomed to the presence of wild animals around us, we treated our encounters with them merely as the exciting experiences of our otherwise uneventful lives in Assam. In time, we got so used to seeing them about the place that we scarcely bothered about them and treated them as a part of the landscape. Sometimes in our minds, we would dub a certain section of the tea plantation the tiger section or the elephant section, because these animals were frequently found there and we were wary when we went to these particular places. But no other precautions were taken by us. And no planter I knew in Assam carried a gun with him on his journeys of inspection around the plantations, which we called kamjari, unless he specifically went out shooting. It would have been unthinkable, almost the hallmark of cowardice, to do this. The first tea plantation on which I served in Assam was called Naga Hills and lay at the foot of the Naga Hills, and heavy jungle surrounded us on every side. Wildlife of many descriptions was to be found in the area: tigers, leopards, elephants, wild boar, deer of several kinds, including sambar or the Indian elk, and scores of creatures of the wild dog family were all around us. Of sporting birds, there were pheasants, including the lovely Lahaul pheasant, probably the most colorful of all the birds of India, green pigeon, jungle fowl, grouse, partridge, quail, woodcock in winter, florican, and numerous waterfowl, from wild geese to teal, as well as the waders like snipe, probably the most difficult bird to shoot. Naga Hills was a hunter's paradise, and like all young men when I first went out, I spent every leisure hour I had with a gun in my hand trying to kill things. But somehow, the destruction of wild animals did not retain its appeal for me, and I took to observing them, taking photographs of them in their natural setting. Consequently, I spent most of my spare time wandering in the heart of the jungle with my camera, and soon accumulated a large collection of photographs of wildlife illustrating the behavior of animals in the jungle, which included all the major fauna to be found in the Assam jungle. Many of these were taken at great risk and recorded jungle incidents of the rarer kind of animal behavior which only falls to the lot of man to witness perhaps once in a lifetime. The thrill of watching and photographing two male tigers fighting for a mate, a tigress playing with her cubs a few feet from where I was hiding, a leopard in mid-air springing upon its prey, or a 20 feet long python darting as fast as an arrow shot from a bow at a monkey or a fawn which it had hypnotized. These were things worth seeing and recording, for which to take risks even if the thought of being discovered was uppermost in one's mind the whole time, because one was only a few feet away from the most ferocious killers in the jungle when their anger was aroused by fear or by the need of protecting their young. To be discovered almost certainly meant a severe mauling, if not death. It was living dangerously with a vengeance, but there was such a conquest of oneself in accomplishing these things, and that, perhaps, was the greatest thrill of all. My first introduction to wildlife came about a week after my arrival in Assam. The manager of the plantation, A.J. Percy, warned me that a rogue elephant was loitering in the jungle on the verge of the tea plantation. He told me I should be careful when moving around in my work in case I ran across him somewhere, for if he could, he would charge me and kill me. I thought he was trying to take a rise out of me because I was a new man, and treated the matter as a joke. "Yes, I know," I said. "He's pink and he stands as high as his house. I may be a greenhorn, but not so green as to believe that. I've heard all about planters' tales, so you can't really pull my leg." "But I'm not joking," he replied. "There is a rogue elephant wandering around the plantation, so do be careful." I murmured something, but was not at all impressed. The next morning I borrowed Brown Bess, his mare, and rode around the plantation, enjoying every moment of my first real view of it. The tea garden was beautifully situated, with the high Naga Hills in the near distance on one side, while the giant trees of the jungle surrounded the other three. Birds were singing everywhere, and the hulak monkeys, called langurs in other parts of India, were sending out agitated whoops and cries from the branches of some high teak trees near a corner of the plantation. If I had known anything about woodcraft then, I should have been able to read their hooting as cries of alarm, but being completely ignorant of any sort of jungle lore, I rode towards the corner where they were now dancing in agitation upon the branches of the tall Assam teak trees in order to get a better view of them. Presently I noticed a movement of the leaves of a young teak tree about 15 feet from the ground, which I thought had been caused by the wind. Suddenly, however, the mare snorted, swung around sharply, and galloped off at breakneck speed. It took me all the strength I had to keep in the saddle, and for the first few moments I was too busily engaged in trying to get my foot back into the stirrup iron from which it had been ejected when the mare had bolted, to even think about what had caused her fright, or to see anything except the road I should hit if I soon did not master the runaway animal, for I was nearly unhorsed. Then the loud trumpeting of an elephant pierced the air, drowning all the other jungle sounds. I looked around. A huge infuriated beast with a magnificent pair of tusks was coming out of the jungle, trumpeting furiously, hitting the ground with a terrific crack every little while with one of his forefeet. The glance I got of him was sufficient to make me see that unless we could get away as quickly as possible, he would destroy both the mare and myself, for once the charge of an elephant gains momentum, it can outpace a fairly fast horse and bring it down over a long distance. If that elephant meant anything, he meant to charge after us. We were over 1.5 miles away from safe harborage at least, and once he really got into his stride, anything could happen. The trumpeting so frightened Brown Bess that she needed no urging from me to gallop faster so that we could get away from the infuriated animal who now started to charge after us. When I saw what was happening, I kept urging the mare on, glancing behind every little while to see how we were keeping our distance, By this time, we must have gained at least 400 yards on the elephant, and I remember feeling a sense of relief when we galloped over a footbridge made of light bamboo matting, which would assuredly stop him. If he tried to charge over it, his huge weight would have precipitated him through the bamboos. However, I kept the mare at a gallop until we turned the corner into the factory yard. I glanced around and saw that the elephant was nowhere in sight, so stopped the mare and turned her back a few hundred yards down the road. But there was still no sign of him, so that it seemed that the bamboo footbridge had successfully prevented him from continuing the chase. But we had not seen the last of him. That same evening, when the manager and I were sitting on the veranda reading, from the corner of my eye, I noticed that the sky, which showed through the tracery of leaves on the branches of the albizia shade trees, suddenly seemed to have darkened. At first, I did not take much notice of it, since dusk descends swiftly in India and merges as suddenly into night. Percy was engrossed reading a book, and I in the Illustrated London News, when, without any warning, we heard a terrific crack coming from the direction of a bamboo bridge near the gate at the entrance to the garden compound. We both jumped up, startled, and there, silhouetted against the landscape, was the huge form of an elephant. "Look, the rogue!" I cried. Percy took one look and ran into his bedroom for his elephant gun, and I watched the great beast, which evidently had been testing the bridge to see if it would bear its weight so that it could come in and wreck the bungalow. When one of the wooden crossbeams holding the bridge cracked when it tried its weight on it, it turned around and ambled away into the shadows. Darkness was coming on swiftly now, and by the time Percy had assembled his elephant gun, it was too risky to have a shot at the beast. In most countries now, elephants are protected in order to prevent them from becoming extinct. The reason for this is that they cannot multiply as quickly as other animals, since the period of gestation is over 2 years for them. Consequently, a special license has to be obtained if one wants to shoot one. But a rogue elephant can be shot at any time. The general belief is that a rogue is an old animal which has been driven out of the herd for ill temper, but I personally am convinced that this is a misconception, and that the temporary insanity called must in India, from which rogue elephants suffer periodically, is responsible for them being outlawed from the herd rather than senility. I have seen several rogues which were quite young animals, and the one haunting Naga was quite a young beast, though he obviously had been driven out of the herd and was a man-killer as well. One night, 4 days before we had seen him, he had wandered into an Assamese village and killed 8 people, trampling down their bamboo houses into matchwood and stamping their bodies into pulp. A reward of 150 rupees, or about 10 pounds, was offered for his destruction, and this was claimed by an Indian hunter who killed him a week after he had visited us, but only after he had increased his score by 3, a man, a woman, and their small child, giving him a total of 11 victims in all. I had another encounter with the wild elephant some years later, but he was not a rogue. This tusker, together with his sleek wife, took possession of one of our out gardens, Rajabari, and would allow no one to enter it. One morning, when the tea pickers went to work, there they found him standing at the entrance to the plantation, and as soon as he scented them, he charged at them trumpeting loudly, so that they became terrified and ran back to the lines. I rode out as soon as I heard about it, and found him there, still very truculent and ready to charge at the slightest provocation, taking up a position on guard and about 10 yards on the garden side of the bridge, where he trumpeted defiance at me, at the same time making small forward charges, stamping his feet on the ground in the most threatening manner. As there was no other entrance to the Rajabari plantation, since it was a garden planted in a cleared pocket in the heart of the jungle, all work had to be suspended for 3 days until he and his wife decided to wander further afield. As this happened in the middle of July, when the growth of tea is abnormally prolific due to heavy rainfall, it was a very serious matter for me, especially on this particular estate, where the soil was one of the richest in all our plantations in Assam. It meant that when I could get to it again, I had to prune the tea bushes by slashing them across the top with a pruning knife, so that we lost about 3 weeks' crop, a heavy price to pay for an elephant's love affair. Part 2. The killing of a rogue. We had been having trouble once again with the rogue elephant. Information had come to us that a rogue elephant had crashed into an Assamese village near Naga Hills the night previously and had broken down 8 bamboo houses, killing 5 people. Immediately, our beaters and trackers were sent out to try and pick up its trail and contact it. And after being away in the jungle for 2 days, they finally came back with the information that they had found it in a patch of jungle near one of our out gardens called Naujan, where it was grazing with a female elephant belonging to the owner of the plantation. It had already been declared a rogue, and a reward of 150 rupees had been offered for its destruction, with the tusks thrown into its killer as an additional reward. That night, there was much excitement at Naga Hills. Percy had organized a hunt for the killer, and 6 planters from neighboring plantations had come over to spend the night with us, since we intended moving out early the next morning in order to be in our positions ready for the drive at dawn. Our battery of guns was really an amazing spectacle, for it consisted of a collection of weapons ranging from the latest things in elephant guns belonging to Percy with a kick like a mule's, to 3 service carbines which were on issue to us as members of the Assam Valley Light Horse. Graded in between were Mannlichers, a Winchester repeater, and other weapons of known and unknown caliber and age. These were brought out now, oiled and tested by the firing of a bullet into the air. All of us looked forward to a good day's sport on the morrow. At 4 o'clock in the morning, we were aroused, and after having tea and coffee, we set out under the guidance of one of our beaters to the jungle. We had to walk about 1.5 miles along a rough track in order to reach the patch of jungle in which the rogue elephant was sheltering, and as the ground was extremely uneven due to the exposed roots of trees and creepers which were growing all over the place, we had to be careful how we trod in the dark lest we tripped over them and fell, with disastrous consequences both to ourselves and to the man in front, who might quite easily be shot if the gun went off when it struck the ground. This, of course, was by no means an ordinary elephant hunt. It was an expedition whose sole purpose was the destruction of a rogue which had killed several human beings. Therefore, all the rules of sportsmanship used in an ordinary elephant hunt were ruled out. Our plan was to encircle the beast, and once he came within range, to fire at him with everything we had in the way of arms. There was to be no squeamishness about it at all, since we were dealing with a ruthless killer, and our job was to destroy it as quickly and decisively as possible so that it could not kill any more people. It soon began to get lighter, and in a little while we could make out the outlines of trees against the sky. Gradually, objects began to become recognizable. Presently, a beater came back to tell us that they had located an elephant grazing in a piece of jungle about 200 yards ahead, and we moved towards the place. Birds were now singing the dawn chorus, and slowly the sky lightened and a shaft of red appeared, telling us that the dawn of the coming day was about to break. Soon, in all its magic, dawn came, and it was a magnificent sight, for the surrounding landscape had taken on the hues of the sky and was blotched and daubed with various tints of purple, red, and yellow, while a soft stillness filled the air, for even the enchanting dawn chorus of the many birds had momentarily ceased. A wild boar broke from cover almost under my feet and ran into some nearby scrub, grunting defiance at us, but we could not shoot it, since our quarry was the rogue elephant. Several jungle fowl rose up into the air all about us, startled by our movement, and soon the hewlock monkeys spotted us and set up a cacophony of hooting from the high trees around us on the verge of the jungle. We had fanned out into a semicircle, and were moving along slowly, looking ahead, very much on the alert. Presently, we saw a beater beckoning to us, pointing to a small patch of jungle nearby, and we crept towards him, fanning out still wider into a larger semicircle. Before long, a shot rang out from the left prong of the semicircle, and a veritable feu de joie followed this. Then I saw a huge elephant crashing through the jungle, trying to get further into it for protection, and we speeded after it. It was obvious that it had been badly hit, because there was a trail of blood on the undergrowth and grass where it had passed. Now, continuous wild firing was taking place everywhere, mostly at the hind quarters of the elephant where it could do least damage. The great beast stumbled on through this hail of fire, bellowing with rage and pain, trumpeting madly as it crashed through the jungle, trying to escape from us. And I somehow felt that there was something amiss with the whole affair, which made me doubt whether it was the rogue elephant at which we were shooting. Consequently, I stopped firing and unloaded my gun. But none of my companions seemed to have noticed that anything was amiss, and presently Percy ran forward. I saw him raise his huge elephant gun to his shoulder. An explosion, almost like that heard when a small cannon is fired, followed, and he fell backwards onto the ground from the recoil. Almost simultaneously, the elephant crashed to the ground and lay still. Percy had shot it through its right ear, a magnificent shot at about 20 paces. Then we had a very nasty shock. When we went up to inspect the dead animal, we found a piece of broken chain still encircling its left foot. It was not the rogue we had destroyed, but Rani, the tame elephant belonging to the head officer of our out garden. We were disgusted with ourselves, and vowed that we would never shoot elephants again after we had rounded up the rogue and killed it. But, fortunately, our luck had not completely deserted us. While we were still arguing about the unfortunate killing of Rani, a beater came running up to tell us that the rogue elephant, which he had located and had been watching while it was grazing about a quarter of a mile from where we now were, as soon as it had heard the sound of firing and the trumpeting of the female after she had been hit, had gone completely mad and had started pulling up young saplings out of the ground and had suddenly started charging in our direction. He had run on as fast as he could to warn us and estimated that it should be with us almost immediately. This was heartening news indeed, since we were all suffering from very bad consciences after the killing of Rani, and a hurried plan was immediately made on how to tackle it when it came within gunshot range. We had scarcely taken cover behind some trees in a wide circle when the rogue broke through a strip of jungle and trotted out into the open, his trunk raised defiantly, trumpeting loudly, advancing towards us with murder in every movement of his immense body. He was a magnificent beast, with a huge pair of tusks, and in his fury would stop every little while and strike the earth with a terrific crack with one of his 4 feet, screaming defiance at us. It takes a lot of courage to face a charging elephant, but when that elephant happens to be an infuriated rogue, one requires an extra share of it. Yet, looking back on it now, it seems marvelous to me that none of us panicked. Everyone seemed perfectly cool and steady, and we held our fire, waiting for him to start the charge which we knew would come any moment now. We did not have to wait too long. Slowly, he broke into an ambling trot, which gradually quickened in pace until finally he charged wildly at the center of our semicircle, where Percy stood with his elephant gun waiting for him. As he came nearer, Percy gave us the prearranged signal, and a burst of fire aimed at his forelegs followed. This slowed him down almost at once, and gave Percy, with the only piece of armor we had capable of dealing with him, the chance for which he had been waiting, and almost immediately he fired. The great beast halted in his stride, reeled back, roaring and trumpeting loudly, but he still kept on advancing, slower in pace, yet evidently determined to kill. But we could see that he was badly wounded, and his trunk was waving around in circles in the air, giving us the impression that he was so badly shaken that he did not know what he was doing. Percy stood there, waiting for an opportunity to put in a fatal shot. By this time, the elephant was almost on top of him, not more than 15 feet away, and we were worried lest he should be overwhelmed by the maddened brute. He moved back about 4 paces, and almost at that moment, the elephant stopped in its tracks, trumpeted loudly, and turned its head to the right, presenting its left ear in line with his sights. Instantly a bullet crashed into its brain, and the great beast gave a mighty roar and crumpled up onto the ground, beating the earth with its trunk in its dying agony. Within a few moments all was still, and the rogue killer of Naujan was dead. The tusks, of course, went to Percy, for he had earned them by his superb shooting and courage. The carcass we gave to our jungle men, the Mundas, the Orauns, and Santals, who feasted for weeks on it. But the skull of the elephant Percy kept, and later he buried it in the foundations of a new bungalow which he built for himself at Naganajan. It was all very exciting while it lasted, but I do not think I would like to shoot elephants again. In this particular instance, we were destroying a killer, so there could be nothing sporting about the way in which we destroyed it. But somehow, I was not quite happy about the way things had gone. I expect the destruction of Rani probably was the cause of putting a damper on the whole affair, and any satisfaction we had out of destroying a man-killer elephant was overshadowed by the wretched death poor Rani had met at our hands. She had been a great favorite with all of us, and almost every one of us had used her for hunting tigers sometime or other. I, myself, only a fortnight previously, when she had behaved superbly, standing up to a charging tiger fearlessly and preventing it from springing onto her back. Unfortunately, on this occasion, she had used her trunk so effectively that I had been unable to fire at the tiger for fear of wounding the elephant in the trunk, so that it got away. But she certainly was a fearless and well-trained shikar elephant. The hunting of wild elephants is one of the most dangerous types of big game hunting. Of necessity, it has to be done on foot, and the hunter stands little chance if, by misfortune or bad judgment on his part, he finds himself in the way of a stampeding herd, and I have known of several hunters who were killed in this way. It is difficult to get away from a charging beast, and it takes a lot of courage to face one, especially when one knows that the vital spots at which one has to fire are so small for so large an animal. The skin of an elephant is so tough and lies so loosely on its body that only a bullet of a very large caliber can penetrate it and reach the lungs or heart, so that the hunter has to shoot it in its head if he wants to kill it. But here again we find its anatomy protecting it, since it has one of the smallest brains for all animals in proportion with its size, and this is amply protected by a huge formation of bone which makes up the forehead. A small spot in the center of the forehead, in line with the eyes, I was told by my elephant hunter friend, Gray, is the correct frontal spot at which to fire. But the more fatal one is through the ear at an angle into the brain. But this is the most difficult shot of all to get, and only an experienced elephant hunter usually succeeds in accomplishing it. Many so-called sportsmen use the easy way of killing an elephant. Their method is to drop the beast by shooting it in the front knees first, so that they can finish it off at their leisure later by numerous shots in the region of the brain. They know nothing about the anatomy of an elephant, so all that happens is more suffering for the fallen mammoth. One gentleman I met in the Sudan used 46 rounds of ammunition on the head of an elephant, which he had brought down by shooting at its knees, before a chance shot found its way into the brain and put it out of its suffering. He was not in the least interested in the amount of pain he inflicted upon the wretched creature, but was concerned only for the magnificent pair of tusks it possessed, which he told me he wanted for his wonderful home in Arizona. When I told him he was a crude savage, he was most indignant with me. I considered him guilty of breaking all the rules of sportsmanship and told him so. The shooting of an elephant in the knees so that it can be killed at leisure later is, in my opinion, the most reprehensible type of behavior and is only excusable when used for killing a rogue, which has to be destroyed at any cost, or when the hunter's life is in danger from a charging beast, which he will be unable to drop by shooting at its head. After all, one is not compelled to hunt elephants, but if a man decides to indulge in this dangerous sport, he should also be prepared to accept all the dangers that go with it as part of the game. Otherwise, he is no sportsman. It should be needless to say that with elephants, as with all big game animals, a wounded beast should be followed up and destroyed. But unfortunately, this is a rule that is often neglected. And I have seen at least 20 elephants suffering much torture from wounds they had received from hunters, mostly in the front legs in both Africa and India. The end.